Look closely at the convulsions of the Western economies and understand that you are not watching a recession, you are watching a metaphysics die in public. For something on the order of 5,000 years, a single style of mind has been running the human enterprise, and that style of mind has a name. Riane Eisler called it the Dominator culture. Terence McKenna, arriving at the same conclusion by way of the molecule and the eschaton, called it the Dominator culture too because it is one thing. A single psychic architecture, and it has finally done the one thing it was built never to do. It has run out of world. Understand what this machine was. It was expansion or it was nothing. It lived the way fire lives, by needing more of something to consume. Another frontier, another continent, another heathen, another vein of ore glittering at the bottom of someone else's mountain. It moved across the planet like a contagion of hierarchy, and everywhere it touched it installed the same arrangement, the one above and the many below, and it called the arrangement progress. It knew exactly one verb: to dominate. To exert power over whatever was softer, smaller, slower, or simply already there. And a thing that can only do that, a thing with no other gear, has a problem waiting for it at the edge of the map. When the victims outside finally run out, it turns with the same undiminished appetite and begins to eat itself. That is the moment we are living inside of. The frontiers are closed. Every acre of the earth has been surveyed, mortgaged, mined, or rendered into a line item, and the predator, finding no fresh outside, has turned its hunger inward upon the only territory it has left. It is colonizing inner space now. It is harvesting the mind. Data is the new spice, and attention is the new gold, and the human being, who once imagined himself a citizen, has been quietly reclassified as content. His joys and his griefs, and his 3 in the morning terrors refined like crude oil into next quarter's product. The empire, having no new world to conquer, has begun to colonize its own bloodstream. Watch it feed. It cannot stop feeding. Stopping was never in the design. But machines like this do not run on steel and capital alone. They run on stories, and underneath the Dominator machine there is a particular set of stories, very old, that sanctified the whole arrangement and called it the will of heaven. I want to be precise here, because politeness has protected these stories for far too long. The Abrahamic religions were not the conscience that resisted the Dominator culture, they were its theology. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam were each born in an atmosphere of conquest and built upon the single most consequential image the Western mind ever produced: a solitary male god enthroned above his creation, demanding worship and obedience, holding the sky as his fortress and the earth as his estate and the human being as his servant. That is not a religion so much as a cosmology of hierarchy, and once it was installed in the imagination, it stamped its shape into every institution that came after. Look at what these stories actually celebrate underneath the incense. The God of the old text demands a loyalty so total that Abraham must raise the knife over his own son's throat to prove it. We are taught to read this as faith. Read it again. It is the sanctification of control, obedience rehearsed at the price of a child. And then on a cosmic stage, Christianity perfects the figure, a father who arranges the killing of his own son and calls the killing salvation. The central emblem of the faith is an instrument of torture lifted up and made holy, the cross, an execution device worn around the neck of half the planet. The message beneath the theology has always been the same, and it is not subtle. Obedience redeems, suffering sanctifies. Authority justifies any cruelty so long as the cruelty is performed in the service of a higher plan. This is the psychology of empire distilled into liturgy and handed out at the altar rail. And these stories did not arrive into an empty world. They arrived into a living one, into the older earth-centered ways of knowing that had treated creation as awake, participatory, and shot through with the sacred, and they declared war on all of it. They burned the groves. They silenced the priestesses. They erased the goddesses and filed the erasure under moral progress. To dominate, in their grammar, was to purify. The body became an obstacle, pleasure became a danger, the feminine became a threat, and the earth herself, who had once been a mother, was demoted to a fallen and passive thing, an inert estate awaiting the plow and the drill. That single demotion is the hinge on which the whole catastrophe turns, because once the world is dead matter, exploiting it is no longer a crime. It is a sacrament. Mining the mountain, killing the infidel, enslaving the so-called heathen, these all became variations on one act of devotion. One God, one truth, one king, one empire. The Dominator culture had found its perfect metaphysical blueprint. Notice the order of events, because this is the part nearly everyone gets backward. The spiritual wound came first. The ecological wound followed. These systems trained the human heart to look upward for its answers instead of outward toward one another and downward toward the ground. They taught that salvation meant escape, that love meant obedience, and that faith meant the surrender of curiosity, which is to say the surrender of the one faculty that might have saved us. They hollowed out the soul and then offered to sell it back, retail, as grace. And once a species has been trained to worship power, the rest writes itself. The colonization, the crusades, the plantations, the corporations. The Dominator gods built the Dominator world, brick by holy brick. Here is the part that should unsettle the secular reader who imagines he escaped all of this. When the faith faded and the old gods finally lost their thrones, the structure did not fall with them. It simply changed costume. Capitalism, nationalism, and the religion of technological progress inherited the full posture of divine authority without missing a single step. The skyscraper replaced the cathedral. The algorithm replaced the priest. The same vertical hunger to ascend, to control, to expand without end remained exactly where it had always been, and we go on speaking the old theological grammar to this day. We simply deleted the word God and pasted in the word growth, or the word innovation, and called the substitution enlightenment. It is the same empire. It only had its suit retailored. And now the empire has reached the edge it was always racing toward. The planet is buckling under the weight of the obsession. You can hear the exhaustion in the soil and in the seas and in the human nervous system all at once. A single fatigue distributed across a biosphere. So the Dominator culture does the only thing it knows how to do when the walls close in. It dreams of a fresh frontier. It calls the dream colonizing Mars. Understand this fantasy for exactly what it is. It is not science. It is the Dominator gospel writing its final chapter. The promise of heaven relocated into a spacesuit. The next holy conquest for a civilization that would rather flee to a dead planet than sit still long enough to feel what it has done to a living one. Escape was always the offer. Mars is only the new sky. But the mythology carries a flaw it can never reason its way out of, and the flaw is fatal. The parasite kills the host. It always has. It consumes the thing that sustains it, and then it dies in the emptiness it manufactured. And that is precisely the road we are on, unless this psychic structure dissolves before it finishes the job. So the task in front of our species is not the task the Dominator mind keeps proposing. It is not to find another frontier. It is to learn for the first time in 5,000 years how to live without one. To trade rule for relationship. What Eisler named the partnership model is not a soft ethical preference to be considered once the serious work is finished. It is the survival strategy. It is a recognition that strength was never domination but connection, never conquest but coexistence, and that we mistook the two for so long that we very nearly died of the error. This turn will not begin in the cathedral, and it will not begin in the market. It begins the way every real thing begins, in consciousness. It asks us to unlearn 5,000 years of hierarchy, and to remember the one fact the whole edifice was constructed to make us forget, that the sacred was never somewhere else. It was never above the clouds, never beyond the grave, never waiting on another world. It was under our feet the entire time. Call it the archaic revival, call it the Gaian mind returning to itself, call it simply waking up. When the Dominator culture at last collapses under the weight of its own mythology, a quieter voice may rise in the silence it leaves behind. The voice of the earth, the voice of reciprocity, the voice of the living web that never once asked to be worshipped and only ever asked to be respected. That voice will not command a sacrifice. It will ask for your presence. It will not demand your faith. It will offer you belonging. And that, if we can finally learn to hear it, may turn out to be the first genuine act of salvation our species has ever performed.